In this episode, expect to learn 30 lessons that I've learned from the last 30 years being on this planet. Expect to learn about the region beta paradox, about why we should not be labeling ourselves, and also about the Japanese art of kintsugi. My name's Sam, and I'm the host of the Lonely Chapter podcast, where each week I speak to different people and unlock their life lessons and key takeaways from their own life stories and knowledge. Today, though, it's just me. So let's get started with our 30 lessons. Lesson number 1 comes from Jocko Willink. So if you don't know who Jocko Willink is, then I don't know where you've been, but Jocko is a retired US Navy SEAL and he's got loads of great insights. But the one we're talking about today is good. It's become a bit of a meme, but the idea is that when things are going bad, there's always going to be something good that comes of it. So the story is that someone comes to Jocko with a problem that they've got, and every single time he just replies with, good. When he speaks about it, he gives examples. So you might have not getting a promotion, good. More time to get better before you go again. Didn't get funded, maybe you got injured, good. You can go away, rehab, get stronger, go again. Didn't get the opportunity at work, good. Saying the word good, if you can say that in a bad situation, it means that you've still got fight left. Lesson number 2 actually comes from Albus Dumbledore / J.K. Rowling. So in the first Harry Potter book, there's a point where Harry's staring into the mirror and he can see his parents, who are obviously dead at this point. And he's sort of dreaming of having them back in his life. And Dumbledore says to him, "It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live. Remember that." And when I read that, I just highlighted it, noted it, and I've come back to it again because I think it's a really nice reminder to not get caught up in your goals and dreams. Whilst they're important to have, and we should all have a general understanding of where we want to go in life, we've also got to remember to live in the moment, because the only time when you're ever going to be present is right now. You can't be sure of the future. You might not even wake up tomorrow. So remember to live. Don't get overly caught up in your dreams and your goals. Lesson number 3 is a lesson that I took from one of my recent episodes. So I spoke to Lee Eldridge, who is a human performance coach, and he has this idea of life pillars. So it came in the conversation when we were talking about work-life balance, and he explained how he didn't really believe in work-life balance and what he preferred to look at it as, which is a really nice visualization, is your life is propped up by a number of pillars. Now, those could be different for everyone. For me, they might be my partner, my job, my exercise, and then my hobbies / this podcast. If you put too much time into any of those pillars, that pillar expands, so it gets wider. What this does is it makes the other pillars narrower, so they're less stable. Now, if that one that you've put all of your time and effort into suddenly disappears or gets taken away, life becomes very unstable. So it's just a really nice way of visualizing, reminding yourself that don't put too much effort into just one thing. Try and spread the balance, be aware of maybe what you're missing out on, and just be aware of your pillars. Lesson number 4 comes from a recent book that I read, and it's gone straight to the top of my reading list in terms of what I would recommend to people. And it's by Dakota Meyer, a US Marine veteran who received the Medal of Honor. So this idea of which line of questioning you use. So There's a what line of questioning, which is quite solution based and logical. But the why, which we tend to go to, is quite emotional, abstract, and inactive. So, an example of this might be if someone's struggling, don't ask them, why are you struggling? Ask them, what are you struggling with? This immediately gives them something that they can actually pick up on and action and try and work to improve. What are you struggling with? Well, I'm struggling with the amount of work I've got to do at my job. Okay, we can work on that. Let's go. Why are you struggling? It's very vague, and you could just start getting answers like, I just feel overwhelmed with everything. Why do you feel overwhelmed? I don't know, I'm probably not good enough at what I do. And it becomes quickly then a self-deprecating thing. Lesson number 5 is sobriety. So I went sober for about 2 years when I was 22 years of age. So I took a lot out of that. I didn't have an awful relationship with alcohol, but I definitely relied on it. I got to the point where I was relying on it for confidence. So I couldn't be fun Sam without having a drink. And I had to have a certain number of beers before I could go and speak to someone. So what it taught me was how to actually grow confidence. And it made me realize as well that no one really cares. Some people will sort of point out to you and call you boring or whatever, but most people actually respect it because it's just self-discipline. And a lot of people probably want to do it themselves. So I took a lot out of that time, and I would recommend it to anyone who maybe feels that they're getting to that stage where they're relying on it. But yeah, just try it for a time. It doesn't have to be never again. I do drink now. I have a much better relationship with alcohol. Do I still drink too much every now and then? Yeah, I'm human. So it's a great lesson in self-discipline and confidence, I think. Lesson number 6 is something I read. So it's called the goal dilution effect. We assume that the more arguments we give, the better our case. Whereas in reality, our weakest arguments dilute the strongest. Generally, you'll only be as convincing as your worst point. So instead of making as many arguments as you can, you should make only the best. So whatever that argument is, just trying to dial in what is the most poignant argument for this case. Stick with it. 1 or 2 arguments. Don't try and throw loads out there because you then get diluted and people will just pick away at the weakest arguments you've got. Lesson number 7 is, again, something that I read by Robert Glover, the author of No More Mr. Nice Guy. So it was this sentence that when I read it, I highlighted it, I took it from the Kindle app and I put it on my Instagram, and I wanted to get it out there because I thought it's such a great question. So the question is this: if you did not care what people thought of you, how would you live your life differently? And I think, especially in this day and age of social media, and we're sort of always on show to some extent, the idea of thinking about what we would do if we didn't care what other people think is really powerful. I think we put a lot of emphasis on how other people perceive us, and it can guide how we go about our days. It can completely change how we act because our first thought is, what will people think of me if I do that thing? Not, is that thing the right thing for me to do, regardless of what people think of me? So it's just a nice reframing, a nice question to just bring you into that moment and just confirm that you're doing things for the right reasons. Lesson number 8. Again, it's another thing that I've read. So a lot of these lessons come from reading, and I suppose that's a lesson in itself, is reading brings some knowledge and it's enjoyable. So this one comes from Gareth Timmins, and the book is called The 0.1% Academy, which is a reference to the Royal Marine Commandos in the UK. So it's about the conflicting mindsets of elite performers. So I'm going to read out the excerpt. According to Alexei Janssen, a top learning and performance coach who spent 17 years conducting Royal Marines and Special Forces operators, all elite performers hold two conflicting beliefs at once, which makes them surprisingly irrational. Number one, total belief in the self. I will pass and get to the end. The likelihood is 100%. Number two is acknowledgement that failure is a likely outcome. I might not pass, and the likelihood seems more like 50-50. An example of the thought pattern here might be, I'm 100% sure that I will pass and get to the end of training. I just know it. There's absolutely no way I'm leaving here without a green beret. But I might not. It is hard. If I don't pass, then so be it. I will go and do something else. But that's not going to happen because I already know it's in the bag. I can do this. So I think it's really interesting that they have these two mindsets at the same time that don't work together. They conflict each other, but without one, it makes them a much weaker person. So if you don't have the complete self-belief, part one, when things get really tough, you won't be able to push through it because you don't have that belief in yourself. If you're just thinking it's 50-50, you might just think, oh, well, this is my time and I'm out. If you don't have the 50-50 mindsets, the part two, and you just have the full belief in yourself, any hint at failure or any like minor failure will just destroy you because you're so sure of yourself. As soon as something goes slightly wrong, you don't have any rational logic to think, well, we knew that could happen, but hey, let's carry on. So yeah, the two conflicting mindsets I find really interesting, and it's a great book as well. Go and check it out. Number 9 is something that I saw online somewhere. I can't remember where it was, but it was the idea that you are a gift. You're a gift to this world, and it's to do with your ancestry. And if you look back at your ancestry tree, each generation back, theoretically, you would double the number of ancestors. So if you went 10 generations back, you would have over 1,000 ancestors. 30 generations back, you would theoretically have over 1 billion ancestors. Although this would be a little bit lower due to a thing called the pedigree collapse, which you can go and read about. It's a really interesting thing where distant relatives, unbeknownst to themselves, may have children, which then obviously reduces your number of ancestors in that line of ancestry. But the idea and the main lesson is that so many people have come together over the years in order for you to be here today. And when you think about that, it just kicks in a bit and makes you realize how lucky we are to be here. So make the most of it, enjoy your life as much as you can, and you are a gift. Lesson number 10 is about self-discipline. So I was speaking to someone about self-discipline, and the way we tend to think about it, maybe in an exercise scenario, is I know that training or going for a run is going to be beneficial to me in the long run. I really, really don't feel like it today, but I know if I go and do it, it will be good for me. So doing hard things when we don't want to do them is self-discipline. But also not doing things when we do feel like it can be discipline as well. And I go back to, say, drinking, for example. If you've got an important day tomorrow or whatever it might be, or you just don't want to drink, by saying no to it, again, that's the self-discipline. And sometimes we forget that and we just think of doing hard things when you don't want to do it, but it's also the opposite. So just remember that self-discipline moves two ways. Lesson number 11. So this one's called Hitchens' Razor. What can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. And this was a quote by Christopher Hitchens. And the basic idea of this is that if someone makes a claim, it's up to them to prove it, not for you to disprove it. I think it's really easy in life for people to just throw out claims without really having to back it up. And they throw out this claim and it's up to someone else to try and disprove it. And it becomes this back and forth. But really, if someone makes a claim without any real evidence, you have every right to say, can you explain and prove why that's the case? If they can't do that, then it doesn't hold up and you haven't even had to try and disprove it. They've disproved it for themselves. So it's a cool idea. I quite like it. And I think in this day and age, we throw out stuff and don't really back it up. So prove it. Lesson number 12 comes from a book by the Minimalists, which I loved. And it was called Love People, Use Things. So this sentence again really hit me. And the sentence is, speak only when your words are more valuable than silence. And I think in life, a lot of the time, we are scared to sit in silence for some reason. We're scared to sit and not say anything. We get into these positions where we feel like we have to talk and someone's always got to be talking. And sometimes just sitting there in silence and listening to what's going on around you, what people are saying, what do they really mean by that, can be way more powerful and valuable than you then speaking. So it's something that I've naturally do as a slight introvert. I would say that I'm quite quiet at times, but a lot of the time I'm just listening, I'm observing, and I try not to speak unless I think I can add some value to a situation. On to number 13. So kintsugi is the Japanese art of fixing broken pottery. But they do this in a different way. So they do it with gold glue or gold dusted glue. So what you end up with is, say, a bowl with loads of gold cracks around it. And the idea is that you're embracing the flaws. So it brings beauty and it brings art into that bowl. And you're not trying to hide the cracks. You're trying to do the opposite. You're trying to show them off because those cracks are unique to that bowl. And to take this into human life, our flaws are what make us us. So if you've got flaws, don't be afraid of them. Embrace them. They are what makes you unique. So paint them in gold and show them off to the world. Lesson number 14 is something I think I spoke about in one of my first episodes, and I just wanted to revisit it. So something that I was reading in an essay. So it's called Mills's Trident, and it's highlighting the importance of free speech. So I'll read it out and explain. Based on John Stuart Mill's observation in his 1859 masterpiece on liberty, in any argument, there are only three possibilities. You're either wholly wrong, partially wrong, or wholly correct. If you are wrong, freedom of speech is essential to allow people to correct you. If you're partially wrong, freedom of speech and contrary viewpoints will help to get even closer to the truth. If you are 100% correct, which is unlikely, you still require free speech for dissent, disagreement, and any attempts to disprove you. This checks your arguments and strengthens them. If you can defend your viewpoint, you're strengthening it. If you're 100% correct, then why would you worry about dissent? If you never have to defend your points of view, there's a very good chance you don't really understand them. If you don't fully understand them, then you're holding them the same way you would hold a prejudice or a superstition, irrationally. It's all about Why? Lesson number 15 is region beta paradox. So, this comes from a paper called The Peculiar Longevity of Things Not So Bad, which was a 2004 paper by Daniel Gilbert and his co authors. So, this idea is about not making a change until things get sufficiently bad. So, often we fail to improve our lives simply because things don't get bad enough. If your new job is hell, then you'll leave it. But if it's just unsatisfying, you'll likely grind it out and stay there way longer than you would if it was awful. Thus, small problems often threaten our quality of life a lot more than big ones. If you think of it in an injury scenario, so you might get a small injury where you can probably get by your day to day life. You might have a slight back pain, you might have a leg injury, and you might be limping around a little bit, but you can get around your day to day life. You carry on with that for however long. If you have a serious injury to your leg and you can't move, you can't physically aren't able to move around it, then you're going to have to spend a period of time recovering, rehabbing, and then you come back stronger with it fully fixed. Now, there's a lot of people that would be still struggling with those minor injuries way after that person has come back. So the region beta paradox is about waiting until things are really, really bad before making a change. Lesson number 16. So, starting off the second half of these lessons is something that I've learned from a few of my guests. I've had a few guests on about sort of the male experience and male mental health. And one of the stats that I heard early on from a few of them was 1 out of 3 domestic abuse victims are men. And that's at least because some may not report it. So, these stats are not represented in the services on offer. So you think maybe 1/3 of the services on offer would be directed at men. That's just not the case. So even the National Domestic Abuse Helpline, which is the 24/7 helpline, is almost primarily aimed at women. So I think it's going to be difficult for men who are suffering this to come forward when we haven't got the services in place. And it's not about taking away from women. I think obviously they are the majority of victims. We wouldn't take that away from women, but it's just being aware that there are a lot more male victims than we actually think about. So 1/3 is a big number. Lesson number 17. So this is about the power of stoicism. So stoicism and stoic, the words get thrown around a lot, and you might see people say, "Oh, I'm stoic. I don't have emotions, or I don't let anything get to me." Well, it's not really stoicism. So stoicism is about feeling your emotions. It's about looking at those emotions logically and then working out whether it's beneficial or not. So it's not about completely cutting them out. And I think that gets sort of blurred out a bit. So the idea is that you look at a situation, can I control it? Yes or no? If I can control it, okay, let's make a change to control it for the better. If I can't control it, what can I do? I can control my reaction to it. So something might happen that's out of your control. You still have the choice to respond in a way that's true to you. And you have the choice to respond. This takes me back to Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, where he speaks about he had everything taken away from him but his choice, how to respond in that scenario. In the concentration camps he was in World War II, he could have died at any point, but he still had his freedom of choice of how he would respond. It is our perception of things rather than the things themselves that cause most of our trouble and most of our unhappiness. Number 18 is something that I learned from a podcast episode with Stuart Trevor, the founder of All Saints, and he was on David McIntosh's podcast, Development by David podcast. And this is about fast fashion. So they were talking about fashion, and he just dropped this stat, and I had to go and Google it and look it up, and it's mind blowing. So fast fashion really is not good for the planet. So every 16 seconds, the equivalent of the height of the Eiffel Tower is thrown in landfill. So that's 324 meters. The height of Mount Everest is thrown every 7 minutes, 8,849 meters. In nearly 8 months, the pile could reach the moon, more than 384 million meters away from Earth. I think it's a stark reminder of how far fashion has come and how fast some of these companies are throwing out the clothing. You look at places like Primark, H&M, Shein at the minute as well, and it's just not sustainable for the planet. We get these really, really cheap items made by kids in factories that we don't like to think about. But whilst I still do have items of clothing from some fast fashion places, it's definitely changed my mind a lot in terms of going forward, of where I buy from, who I'm buying from, and the values of the companies that I'm buying from. I want to sort of understand that now a bit more. Lesson number 19 is about trusting yourself. So at the minute, it seems like we've sort of gone away from just trusting ourselves. And I'm talking in terms of maybe our health, how we're feeling. We use these fancy bits of kit like Whoop straps and Garmin watches. And I'm not talking them down. I do have a Garmin watch myself and I track it all as well. I just don't really look into it too much. So it tracks your sleep, it tracks your body battery, it tracks your heart rate over time. Now, some of this is very useful, absolutely. And I wouldn't say that it's all rubbish. But I think we get really over the top invested in it. And I think I got to a point where I was waking up every morning looking at my watch, and if it said I had a bad night of sleep, I'd be like, oh no, I had a bad night. Yeah, I do feel bad. But actually I felt all right. And sometimes when it said I had a good night of sleep, I felt bad. So I've started listening to my body more now in terms of how I've slept and how I'm feeling day to day and minute to minute. And I think we all need a little reminder to just do that sometimes. We're too focused on what the experts say and the optimize that, do all this stuff. Just listen to your body, how it responds to certain things, and go from there. Lesson number 20 comes from an essay on Stranger's Loop, and it's something that's been quoted by loads of people. And I heard it through Chris Williamson on his podcast. And it's a list of things that are not doing the thing. Preparing to do the thing isn't doing the thing. Scheduling time to do the thing isn't doing the thing. Making a to-do list for the thing isn't doing the thing. Telling people you're going to do the thing isn't doing the thing. Messaging friends who may or may not be doing the thing isn't doing the thing. Writing a banger tweet about how you've got to do the thing isn't doing the thing. Hating on yourself for not doing the thing isn't doing the thing. Hating on other people who have done the thing isn't doing the thing. Hating on the obstacles in the way of doing the thing isn't doing the thing. Fantasizing about all the adoration you'll receive once you do the thing isn't doing the thing. Reading about how to do the thing isn't doing the thing. Reading about how other people did the thing isn't doing the thing. Reading this essay isn't doing the thing. The only thing that is doing the thing is doing the thing. And I love this, and I'm sure a lot of people listening who've heard that before will love it as well. I think it's one of the biggest things that I thought about when I started this podcast. And again, I've spoken about this before, but I thought about this podcast for many months before it actually came to fruition. And it got to the point where I was starting to overthink things and worry about how I was going to do certain things. And I think the best thing that I did was just taking that first step, recording an episode. And in doing that, I was committed. I just had to. I said I was going to do it weekly. I've got to do it weekly. So doing the thing is the most important thing. The rest will follow. Okay, so coming into the final 10 on the home straight now. So this lesson is personally, it's my Monzo pots, but it might be any sort of form of small bank account pots that you make on your various bank accounts. So the idea is that you have pots for certain things that you know you're going to have to pay for. So in one of my episodes with Rob Reed, a financial advisor, he spoke about this idea and he said stuff like Christmas. Christmas comes around every year without fail. We know it's going to be there. We know it's going to cost us money, but we always never save up for it. We're never ready for it when it comes. So he was saying about putting maybe £50 a month away in a pot away for Christmas. When it comes to Christmas, you've got the money. You don't have to worry about taking it out of that pay packet. I do a similar thing with my car insurance, my car like fixes, anything that needs doing with it. Also for holidays, I'm looking to go on holidays, so I know that's going to be a cost. And what this changed for me was where before I would put all of my savings in just one big savings account. When it then came time to pay my car insurance, which has got way more expensive again, it felt psychologically bad pulling a big chunk of money out of my savings because it was like, I've saved up to here, and now I've dropped off a bit. I've got to rebuild that before I can then go past it. Whereas if they're in a separate pot, that savings keeps going up each month regardless. And I'm just taking it out of this separate pot where I pay maybe 100 in each month. And I know at the end of the year, when those car fees come through, I can pay them off. And it's not a psychological hit to me. Lesson number 22. So this is about the idea that no one really knows what they're doing. There's no way they can because they haven't had a warm-up run to life. So we look at people sometimes and we think, gosh, they've got it sorted. They know exactly what they're doing. A lot of the time people don't. They just look like they do. On the inside, they might be in utter chaos, going everywhere. On the outside, they present themselves very calmly and effectively, and it can trick us. But I think it does well to just remember that no one's had a warm-up run at life. So we're all learning this for the first time. We're learning as we go, trying to figure it out and pretending that we know what we're doing. So hopefully that helps you just calm down and try not to compare yourself to other people as much, because I know that's something that we do. It's something that I've done before, and it's no good for anyone. Lesson number 23. So this is the lesson that you can stop reading a bad book. This weird feeling we get when we're reading a book or maybe watching a film where we get a bit into it, we're not really drawn in by it. It's not really pulling on us like other books have or other films have. And it's okay at that point to just stop reading it. If it's not for you, it's not for you. There's no point putting more time and effort into it just to say you finished it. If you're not finding value from it, it's okay to put it to the side. And this is a small sort of example, I suppose, of sunk cost fallacy, which is the idea that we continue to do things that we know we're not really enjoying or getting any benefit from because of the time and effort that we've already invested into it. So it could be reading a book, viewing a movie, it could be a relationship. You could have been in a relationship for 2 or 3 years and it's not good for you and it's not what you want in a relationship and you've tried to fix it already. You're now just staying in it because of those 2 or 3 years that you've given up of your life. But really, you'd be better off leaving it, growing as a person, and going again. Lesson number 24 is something that I said to Martin Seeger in my most recent episode. So we were talking about mental health, his work in mental health and psychology over the years, and more recently into male mental health and the male experience. And I said to him that men's problems aren't just men's problems, women's problems aren't just women's problems. We often get into this weird debate where it becomes a competition of who's got more issues or who's got the more extreme issues. But realistically, if a man's struggling, that man will have a mother, daughter, sister, a wife, and it's going to affect all of those people. So, and vice versa for women and the males in their lives. So, it's in everyone's interest to understand everything they can about all experiences. And I think that's something that gets missed quite a lot. And unfortunately, we get into this two sides, we get in our trench and we're fighting the opposition when in reality, we should be meeting up, coming together, hearing the other side, and working out solutions. Lesson number 25, think before you act. So, this is something that I've learned over the last few years, probably over the last 10 years. I try to think about how I'm going to act. Obviously, there's going to be scenarios where you act impulsively and you don't have time to think about what you're going to do. But just taking a split second to think about how you want to react and the action you want to take can be really, really important. So if someone sent you a message and it's made you angry and you want to reply with an angry message and say what you really think, is that really going to be beneficial? Do you think maybe the other person's having a bad day? Maybe the text message just didn't read as they intended it to. Text can be really difficult for people to sort of get emotions across sometimes. So before jumping to conclusions, just have a moment to think, is this the right response? Could they be having an off day? And think before you act. Lesson number 26 is about social media, and it's the lesson that I took from it about 6 years ago. So, 6 years ago, I came off social media. I started by deactivating my accounts. I deactivated all of the accounts before finally deleting them just to make the transition easier. But it was almost an overnight thing. As soon as I was off that social media and it wasn't on my phone to just pick up and look and scroll, I stopped comparing myself to people. I stopped thinking about how well they were doing and how I wasn't doing so well. I just felt a lot better in myself. I had more time to myself. I had more time to work on myself. And I would encourage anyone who's thought about doing this to give it a go. Start by deactivating an account because you can always pull that back. Get the apps off your phone and just try it for a week, for a month, maybe put a small time frame on it and just have a bit of fun with it. But I think you will be surprised how big the lesson can be for you. And obviously, I have gone back to social media now with this podcast as a way to sort of spread the message and try and spread what I'm learning from my awesome guests with the listener. So I sort of have to do it, which is okay, but also I'm trying to fight off the urge to go scrolling. And occasionally I lose that fight and I find myself scrolling along. But on the whole, I'm doing okay with it. And if you do give up social media for a time, I'd be really interested to see how you find it or if you have done in the past. So hit up the comments, send me a message. I'd be really interested to see what benefits you guys have found from it. Lesson 27, and this is another one from Dakota Meyer, who we learned from earlier. And this probably shows how good the book is, in my opinion. There's way more in that book that I was tempted to add to this episode, but I've left it at two. So, this is an idea that quite often we miscommunicate what we're actually going through. So, we might say, "Oh, I've got this problem," when really you've got an inconvenience. So, inconveniences are not problems, and problems are not emergencies. An inconvenience is a situation in which we can make a decision or take an action that will create change. A problem is a situation where no matter what actions we take or decisions we make, we won't be able to fix it. And an emergency is a situation that requires immediate action. So we might say, I've got a problem at work with this colleague, I can't work with them. Really, that's an inconvenience. It's an inconvenience. You can't work with them. And you can work with them. There'll be a way of working around that. So a problem would be maybe an illness to a loved one that you get. You can't change that, but you can support them. You can try and work through it with them and go from there. An emergency would be a life or death situation, a car crash, something really severe. But just reminding ourselves that inconveniences are not problems. I think so often we say, I've got a problem or this is a problem. Really, it's an inconvenience, and an inconvenience we can act on and we can change. Coming in to the last three, then. So, lesson 28 is about labels, and this is about the idea that the labels we put on ourselves can really limit us and find it hard to let go of the label. So, it might be a job, it might be an emotional state. So, examples would be if you're depressed, you say, I am depressed. It puts a finality on it. It means you're identifying as depressed. If you can change that to, I'm currently feeling depression, okay, you're currently feeling that. We can change that over time. Will it be easy? No, but you can change it. In my scenario with my work, I could say, I am a firefighter. I'm identifying myself as a firefighter. But what I could really be saying is, I currently work as a firefighter. If I lose my job for whatever reason, or I quit, or I retire, I have to be able to leave that identity behind. And what happens again, and this sort of goes back to Lee Eldridge and his pillars at the start of this episode. Once we leave work or we leave that, we retire, people will then say, I'm an ex firefighter. It's still clinging to that label. And whilst you can say, I used to work as this, it's not who you are. Really, you should be saying, what are your values? What do you believe in? And what's your goals? I think those are much more important than a label that we put on ourselves or society puts on us. Number 29 is about listening. So listening is a skill, properly listening, active listening. Picture a time where you've been talking to someone and whilst you're talking to them, telling them something that's really important to you, maybe they might be on their phone, looking down at their phone, or on a computer, or just doing something else, not really 100% in the room. Did you really feel listened to? When people are distracted, they can't listen properly. It's not possible. So to really listen, you need to be able to make eye contact, nod and affirm when you're taking in information, reflect the words back to the person. If someone says to me, I'm really struggling at work because this person's upset me, you can say back to them, well, you said that this person's affecting you. Would you like to tell me a little bit more about that? In that little response there, you've told them that you've listened, you've framed what they've said, put it back to them in a question to find out more information. They're way more likely now to open up a bit more about it because they know you listened to the first part and you're interested in learning more. And that's when you get people to open up. To finish off this list with lesson number 30, it is stop being scared of failure. So, again, one of the biggest, most common fears in people is failure. Whether we like to admit it or not, we always are quite scared of failing. Failing is useful because if you succeed, then that's positive. But if you fail, you learn from it. You don't really learn from success. You learn from failure, and then you improve yourself so you don't fail next time, so you succeed next time. And that's a repetitive thing. I was thinking about this the other day, and who is the best at failing? And I think I landed on comedians. So tell me in the comments if you think another group of people maybe fail even more often. But think of a comedian going to all of their little gigs, and they do these small gigs at small venues where they try out all this new material. Most of it won't work, and they might get a 5-minute snippet that works. So they then go to the next gig with that 5 minutes and add on a load of new stuff. Maybe 5 minutes of that works. They start to build up and up and up and repeat and repeat and repeat. Find out what doesn't work, find out what does work until they have a full set of an hour or so. Now, it's one of the only things, a comedian, where you get an instant reaction. You can instantly find out if you succeeded or you failed. It's a black and white line. People are there to laugh. If they are not laughing, you failed. So you learn from that and you go again. If they laugh, you've succeeded. Cool, that one works. I don't know if there's any other sort of scenarios like that, but I think in general in life, the lesson is stop being scared of failing. Just do the thing. And that brings a wrap to the 30 lessons that I have learned. I've recently turned 30, which is why I wanted to do this episode. And I just thought that throwing 30 sort of quick fire ideas and lessons out, maybe you just resonate with one or two, and that's great. If you don't resonate with them all, fine. But if you take away one or two things from this episode, maybe tell a friend about them, tell them what you've learned and your own experiences of it, and let me know which ones you enjoyed the most, which ones you resonated with the most. If you're new here, please do share the show with a friend who you think would enjoy it or find value from it, as that really helps me reach new people. Also, if you haven't already, please do rate and follow the show wherever you're listening or watching, as that helps me reach new people. It helps the podcast get pushed to new audience and thus help more people learn alongside myself. Also, you can follow on Instagram at Lonely Chapter Podcast. And lastly from me, thank you for listening.